Tonight's program features a discussion and brief cooking demonstration, followed by a small tasting. On your chair, you'll find a card and a pencil. Please use these to write a question to the speakers, and we'll collect them. We'll circulate and collect them throughout the evening. So without further introduction, please help me welcome Robert Su, Associate Director at the Asia Society.
Thank you, Allison. We really appreciate working with you on this program. It's really great to be partnering with the Asian Art Museum on such an amazing event. We're also grateful to the Osher Center and, of course, to the International Association of Yoga Therapists as well for their support. But I also wanted to thank one of my colleagues, Maria Scarcella-Thorpe. She really took the lead on our side to help Allison put this event together, and I just really wanted to thank you, Maria. And this isn't the first time we've worked with the Asian on programs such as this, and we've really had a long history of partnership and collaboration on bringing these types of events to our community, and it's a natural one for us. And for those of you who don't know who we are, who the Asia Society is, we are a global organization that's really dedicated to providing new perspectives and ideas about the U.S.-Asia relationship in areas such as policy, business, and education, but also arts and culture. And in addition to the SF Center, we have 10 centers located throughout the US and Asia. 3 of these centers, New York, Hong Kong, and Houston, also contain museum spaces, where we do also showcase Asian and Asian American art. For today's event, we're so pleased to actually be talking about food and eating, which I think everyone loves, and which the Asia Society, we actually have a very big passion for organizing events on. And we've really learned that food can be a very mysterious and life-changing process, and it has this incredible ability to bring people together. And its spiritual and lifestyle origins are sometimes taken for granted, and I hope that with the help of our speakers today, we can learn more about what Ayurvedic cuisine is and how it can promote well-being and physical and mental well-being. So before I welcome Jay Shu, who's actually the director, as all of you know, of the Asian Art Museum, up to the stage, who will in turn introduce Margaret Chesney, our moderator for the program, I wanted to let everyone know that like the Asia Society is a membership organization, and we do hope that all of you can consider joining us. So with that, I'm very honored to welcome Jay to the podium. Jay has led this museum as director for the past 6 years, and his many years of experience in the art world has included positions at the Art Institute of Chicago, the Seattle Art Museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the Shanghai Museum. He's also a member of the Committee of 100 and also a member of the Association of Art Museum Directors. We're also very proud to say that Jay is a member of the Asia Society Northern California's Advisory Board. So thank you, Jay, and please welcome me in welcoming him. Thank you.
Thank you for the nice introduction right here at our museum. And with all those appellations, I must sound very old. On the other hand, as a member of the advisory board for the Asia Society, I cannot tell you enough how good Asia Society is. So you should all consider joining Asia Society. Wonderful programs all year round. And yoga, of course, is bring us today here together, and I think the food is always the best medicine. And therefore, you can already tell I must be a foodie, like all kinds of food. I just myself recently was in South India for an extensive trip to explore future exhibitions, and Ayurveda, food, the sight, the smell. In Indian world, the rasa of the spirit of India is just mesmerizing, just truly wonderful. So you have tremendous, wonderful things that you're looking forward to this evening. So I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge tonight's co-presenters, Asia Society, International Association for Yoga Therapists, and UCSF, Osha Center for Integrative Medicine, and everyone who made this program possible. It is through strategic partnership with organizations such as these that I just mentioned, that our museum, the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco, is able to produce such engaging, high-quality programming that connects the works of art to history, literature, and science. I would also like very much to recognize our own curators, Associate Curator of South Asian Art, Kamal Adamji, and our Assistant Curator for Himalayan Art, Jeff Durham, for their tireless work bring yoga, the art of transformation, to the Asian Art Museum. I can tell you that in a small way myself is transformed by this exhibition, because just 2 days before the exhibition opened, for the first time in my life, I took upon yoga as a practice. I went to JCC and realized that I qualified for one of the 2 programs. One is called the Gentle Yoga. The other is called Yoga for the Inflexible. But that's a beginning. That's a good beginning. I think if I do it for 20 years, and not only physically, but more important, mentally, I think I will be in a great, fantastic shape. So we're very fortunate to host the world's first major art exhibition about yoga, featuring breathtaking examples of yogic artworks from 25 museums and private collections in Europe, in the United States, and India, dating from the 2nd to the 20th century. I encourage everyone to visit the exhibition after tonight's program to enjoy the impeccable display of these stunning works of art. But here now, it is my greatest pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator, Dr. Margaret Chesney, Osher Foundation Distinguished Professor in Integrative Medicine and Director of the Osha Center for Integrative Medicine. Dr. Chesney oversees programs in research, education, and patient care, all of which emphasize the combined use of a modern medicine with complementary approaches and established healing practices to promote health, wellness, and healing. Previously, Dr. Chesney was Professor of Medicine and Associate Director of the Center for Integrative Medicine at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Before that, she served for 5 years as the first Deputy Director of NIH's National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine. I think this is a wonderful word to explore indeed. So without further ado, let me please welcome and bring to the podium Dr. Margaret Chesney. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay. This is the third of 3 very special events sponsored by the Osher Center for Integrative Medicine with marvelous partners, the Asian Art Museum, the Asian Society of Northern California, and the International Association for Yoga Therapists. And this has been really an exciting opportunity for us to bring art and science together here in San Francisco, and this is just the beginning. We need to do more of this. It's just been life-changing, as Allison and now Jay have shared. I'm going to just want to mention one thing, in that in our earlier times we talked about how, in our earlier session, we talked about how yoga is 4,000 years old. And now tonight you're going to hear about medicine that originated 3,000 and 4,000 years ago. It's very, very fascinating. And then we will move ahead to talking about how this can become part of our lives in cooking. So this is, Actually, this affiliation and partnership is so greatly enhanced by the Asia Society of Northern California. So I want to especially thank Allison Wyckoff for all she's done here at the Asian Art Museum to help us be so welcome, and also Maria Thorpe, who's helped us put this together. But my job now is to get us going. And I want to introduce the 2 experts that I will be speaking with tonight. One is Dr. Annan Dhruva. He's a physician and a researcher specializing in integrative oncology, that's the treatment of cancer, Ayurvedic, and yoga. In addition to serving on the member of the faculty at the Osher Center, he's an associate professor of medicine in the division of hematology and oncology at the School of Medicine at UCSF. He's a graduate of a special program in integrative medicine that's offered at the University of Arizona. This was established by Andrew Weil. Some of you may know of him. And Dr. Dhruva's had extensive training in Ayurveda and yoga. And Dr. Dhruva and I will be joined by Nalini Mehta. She's the chef and founder of Route to India. She started teaching Ayurvedic cooking classes 10 years ago in New York City. She began her career in the food industry as a culinary instructor at the National Gourmet Institute for Food and Health, and this was followed by a number of positions, including Whole Foods Culinary Center and the New York Open Center teaching vegetarian cooking classes. She's been a speaker at a range of institutions, including the Baruch College, the Rubin Museum of Art, Princeton University, and the United Nations. Through Route to India, Nalini offers an array of vegetarian cooking classes, all rooted in the science and the philosophy of Ayurveda, along with annual Ayurvedic culinary trips to India. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Nalini and Annan to join me up at the podium on the left or the right, and we'll just get started teaching you about yoga and also Ayurveda and medicine.
Thank you for that kind introduction.
Quick set change. So I want to welcome all of you to the Ayurvedic Kitchen Pharmacy and the Yoga of Culinary Spices. We'll talk a little bit later about what we mean by the yoga of spices. It's an interesting concept. But first, I want to ask Dr. Dhruva, Anand, what is Ayurveda? And then we'll get to the yoga spices later.
That's a great place to start. And Ayurveda, in general terms, is a whole system of medicine, which means that it's a system that has its own worldview and has its own system of diagnostics and therapeutics. Ayurveda is in many ways similar to traditional Chinese medicine, which is a system that many of you are probably familiar with. In traditional Chinese medicine, you have acupuncture, you have herbs, you have diet, and you have Tai Chi. Ayurveda is very similar in the sense that, similar to herbs that are in Chinese medicine, Ayurveda also has its own pharmacopoeia of herbs and spices. Similar to Chinese approach to diet, there's an Ayurvedic approach to diet, which you'll learn about tonight. And similar to acupuncture, in Ayurveda, there is also a system called marma of treating points on the body for therapeutic purposes. Even Western medicine, you could say, is a whole system of medicine, because in Western medicine, you also have surgery, you have medications, you have therapy, and all these come together to create a therapeutic effect. But the differences between Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, and Western medicine are some of the things that you're going to hear about tonight in this talk. For example, in Ayurveda, there is, in addition to thinking about a disease diagnosis, there's also the concept of an individual mind and body constitution. So in a sense, that's who we are, who you are, and that's always incorporated into what Ayurveda advises. Many of you may have heard these days about the concept of personalized medicine, and these days we talk about that with genetics and molecular biology. In many ways, Ayurveda and Chinese medicine were the ancient versions of personalized medicine. So we're going to talk more about a lot of this tonight.
So one thing that really puzzles me is, where does the word Ayurveda come from? What are the origins of that word?
So Ayurveda comes from two Sanskrit words, Ayu, which means life, and Veda, which means knowledge. So in a way, you could think about it as the knowledge of life, or an understanding of how to live your life in a healthy way. This is what Ayurveda itself means. In thinking a little bit about what the word Ayurveda means and where Ayurveda comes from, you really have to go back in time, several thousands of years ago, when this system originated, and put yourself in the place of ancient people when they looked at the world around them and also tried to understand themselves and their place in the world. And I'd like to share with you a couple of quotes that really start to talk more about what Ayurveda is. And so this is from a text called Charaka Samhita, which was written several thousand years ago. And it says that the stream of life carries in its current its own supporting and protecting wisdom. Now that's a very poetic way of saying something. I'll tell you what it means to me. Three things. One, that in nature there is the power or capacity to provide healing. Secondly, that within our own nature, within who we are, because we are also a part of nature, we also have that self-healing capacity. And then thirdly, that Ayurveda is about harnessing and enhancing that self-healing capacity. This quote is also from the same text, and it says that body, mind, and soul are like a tripod. Life is sustained by their combination. In them, everything abides, and this is the subject matter of Ayurveda. Right now, we're in the midst of an exhibition here at the Asian Art Museum on yoga. And in fact, you could really think about yoga also as the integration of body, mind, and spirit, this union or yoking of these three elements of a being. And as you can see, Ayurveda and yoga really share this common belief system about health, disease, and again, our place in the world and who we are. And I think this quote really speaks well to that.
And what really strikes me in hearing about this is that as Anand is talking about Ayurveda looking at each human being as a person that has mind, body, and spirit, that is really the origins of the public movement that has pushed for integrative medicine. People wanting, when they see a physician, someone who's going to think of them as a whole person, not just a knee or a sore elbow or a back, but someone who has a mind. A sprained ankle for someone like myself would be an inconvenience, whereas a sprained ankle for an athlete could be life-threatening in terms of the quality of his or her life, their dreams, their vision of what they want to be as they, mature in this world, or a dancer. So it's really important to be thinking about human beings as real individual people and thinking about medicine and treatment, as Anand has just said, that would be very personalized for what can make you the most healthy person you can be and how to handle any maladies that you may encounter. So moving along, visiting the exhibition, we talked about how yoga and Ayurveda are 4,000 years ago. Can you tell us whether or not Ayurveda developed at that same time? Was it developed by the yogis? And how is Ayurveda actually linked to yoga?
So Ayurveda and yoga have common origins, and they do go back thousands of years, and they share, as I say, a common language. In the quote that I just shared with you, I talked about how they're sort of similar in their purposes. You could think about yoga as a joining or a union of body, mind, and spirit using things like postures and breathing practices and meditation. And Ayurveda shares a lot of those same common goals, but in addition, Ayurveda is also a medical system. So it's about treating illness. And additionally, Ayurveda is also about prevention and wellness. And so what you'll hear a lot about tonight in our conversation is about how you can use Ayurveda to improve your wellness. How can you incorporate diet and lifestyle practices to stay healthy and to live a long life as well?
And so part of the title says the yoga of culinary spices, and I promised that you'd get into that. So what does that mean?
Yeah, so it's more than just a cute title, actually. The word yoga, as you've heard, means yoking or joining. And so in Ayurveda, we often talk about combinations or joining of herbs, for example. So a combination of herbs is called a yoga of herbs. And so similarly, a combination of spices, which you'll hear Nalini talk about a little bit later tonight, is the yoga of spices. So again, that sort of rings true for yoga, whether you're talking about postures, or yoga, whether you're talking about spices.
In working with Anand and thinking about this exhibition and trying to think about how thousands of years ago wise people in societies would try to understand why are some people becoming ill and why are some people staying healthy? Why, what is happening? How is this going on? They didn't have biology. They didn't have anatomy textbooks. They didn't know about all the things that we know about molecular biology. So they were trying to understand this in terms of the earth. They saw, birth, they saw death, they saw, you read about this in the Old Testament and in texts and scrolls of how ancient scholars were trying to understand this idea of, dust to dust, ashes to ashes. What does that mean? How are we different as human beings? How are we different from animals? And there's this, you see this around the world of linking human beings to the earth and trying to understand how we emerged from the earth, but what made us different. and thinking about the fact that somehow we have a spirit. And it's interesting to go through culture after culture, and you read about this philosophy of what makes us human and how we connect, and often it's connecting to the cosmos. So I'm wondering if you could share with us, Anand, is that kind of what was happening when yogis kind of tried to understand and then create a medicine to heal these human beings? Do we turn to the earth for that medicine?
Mm-hmm. That's great. Go to the next slide.
Oh, next slide. I'm in charge of slides. So if any problems, blame me.
So first I wanted to just thank Nalini for sharing this picture with us, which as you can see is really a beautiful image. And I want to spend a few minutes talking about this image in the context of what in Ayurveda is called the 5 elements. And in the Ayurvedic worldview, these are the core principles of Ayurveda. And again, if you have to understand the 5 elements, you really have to go back in time. And imagine you're an ancient person sitting and trying to understand the world. And when ancient people did this, they decided that all of the universe, all of nature, is made up of 5 elements, either literally or symbolically. And let's talk about them a little bit. So in this image, you see water element. We have this beautiful river sort of flowing through this scene. And to understand water, what this means, I think we're all familiar with water in the mundane sense, but let's try to understand it in more of the symbolic sense, or what it could mean in terms of health. Imagine how you feel when you're in front of a body of water. Imagine a lake that's very still, or the ocean. There is this sort of vastness to it. There is this calm stillness, this internal stability that comes from being near water. In the Bay Area, we can also think about fog, which is also water element, and how that feels when we're in fog, for example. Or similarly, earth element, when you're standing firmly on the earth and stable and grounded, how that feels. And then fire. You see in this picture, the sun is shining right in our faces. And we can also imagine what that feels like, kind of like when the spotlight is right in my face. I can feel the heat of that light coming at me. And that's how we feel with the sun as well, in terms of fire element, that transformation that's possible with fire. And then lastly, air element, which you could think about as wind. So imagine yourself in the top of a hill in San Francisco where the wind is blowing, and what it feels like to be in the midst of that wind that's blowing in your face. And space element is the hardest to explain because it's the thing that contains everything else. And you can see that how these 5 elements are here in this image as well. And you can imagine yourself sitting and observing nature and seeing just these 5 elements in nature. And also, we being a part of nature, those same elements are operating in our body as well.
In fact, approximately 60-some% of our bodies are water. When we're born, a new baby is 78% water. So the ancient scholars probably knew that about us. Another thing to just think about is in traditional Chinese medicine, I think some of the same elements are there. And the Greek philosophers talked about the 4 elements, air, fire, earth, and water. So it's very interesting that even in ancient cultures, you see these themes occurring again and again. But how do we get from this to medicine? Help me get there.
Okay. So if we go to the next slide, we can
slide.
do. So again, the 5 elements are a little bit abstract. So let's put them aside for a moment and go to the 3 principles of Ayurveda, which is the principle of movement, the principle of transformation, and the principle of structure. And if you go to your handouts that are on all of your seats, let's go through this together a little bit. And I think this will help you to understand a little bit some of the basic ideas of Ayurveda. So.
Turn it over to the back.
So Ayurveda talks about 3 principles. The principle of movement, which traditionally they call Vata, the principle of transformation, which they call Pitta, and the principle of structure, which they call Kapha. And so life, all of life needs all of these 3. You can't imagine life without movement. You can't imagine life without transformation, which is digestion, thinking, cognition, changing from sleep to wake. And you can't imagine life without structure. So these are all requirements for life. But Ayurveda says that each of us is born with the predominance of one or more of these elements. For example, a person could be a predominant of movement principle or vata. And so they have a higher preponderance in their body of air and space element. And so on your handout, you kind of see what that kind of person looks like. They would tend to be lighter in their builds because they have more air and space element. They tend to be lighter on their feet, so they're moving more. They tend to also be lighter in their mind, so their mind is very active and moving around. So they're the kinds of people who are going to be very creative and very tangential as well. They're the kind of people who you'll see walking down the street, but will turn left and then right and then left and right again, because they'll get interested in a lot of different things as they go down the street. Pitta people, in contrast, are a preponderance of fire element. And so with fire comes the intensity and the heat that goes with fire. And so Pitta people tend to be more of a medium build, but they have the sharpness of fire. So when you look, someone who is a Pitta constitution looks at you, they have a sharpness to them. They have a penetrating gaze. It almost feels like they're looking through you because they're so sharp in their nature. Because of that fire, they're also often very ambitious and driven and focused. But when they're out of balance, they tend to become more angry and irritable because they have too much of the heat in their system. And then lastly, you have the principle of kapha, which is the principle of structure. And because those people have more earth and water element in their mind and body, they're sturdier, they're stockier, they have thicker bones and thicker muscles and thicker skin. And in their mind, they have also that same earth and water element. So they're steady and calm and usually peaceful people. But when out of balance, they could tend to gain weight. They could tend to be more stagnant in their mind and maybe just want to sit on the couch. And there are combinations of these three as well. You can have a vata and a pitta combination, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how Ayurveda looks at these three principles in terms of health.
So each one of us could look at these and pick a couple that probably characterize us. And then we're beginning to do that personalized medicine because that would be something that an Ayurvedic clinician would be doing.
Exactly. And so in Ayurveda, the principle is that opposites balance each other and like increases like. So if you have a lot of lightness in your mind and body, for example, in a vata person, you're going to want to bring in more earth and water element. More of that groundedness and stability is going to be balancing, and it's going to be something that will improve your health. And so there are examples of that with all of these three principles. And that's where the diet comes in. So we're going to talk about this in a specific example soon using a volunteer.
And then did you want to talk a little bit about, then these are the three doshas, right, that we hear so much about, the vata and the pitta. So Anand, shall we move ahead with that? Do you want to, Anand is both a Western physician and he's also an Ayurvedic physician. So I'm going to ask him to be my primary care doctor for just a moment. And I will have come in to see him, but he's going to wear his Western hat. And I've come in for my annual physical. I'm in pretty good health. I don't take any medications. All my systems seem to be running more or less on time. But I feel a little stressed because of my iPhone and all the emails, that I tend to look at that and I realize there's another 8 emails, and then I put it down and then I realize there's another 12 emails, and I start looking at it when I get up in the morning, first thing. So I am feeling a little stressed about that. So I've come in to see you, and how would you as a Western physician deal with me in my annual physical?
So now I'm a Western physician for this moment? Okay. And you're telling me you're healthy, you have no medical problems? I'd say see you next year. And I mean, not to disparage Western medicine, I'm a Western medicine physician as well, and I think it has a lot of uses. But when it comes to prevention and wellness, I think this is one gap in Western medicine. And the story, I think, would be very different if we're talking about Ayurveda.
Okay, so now you can be Ayurveda physician.
So we would start with the basics. We talked a moment ago about these three principles. So the first step would be to find out what is your constitution. And so we would start by asking some questions that would help us to determine your constitution. So the first set of questions would be related to physical characteristics. So what is your build? What is your weight? Things like that. I won't ask you your weight on stage. But you can generally see that Margaret is of a slighter build, and that automatically starts to tell you that there is a lot of air and space element in her body build. Then we'd start to look at psychological characteristics, and I know from working with Margaret that she's a multitasker, and she likes to do a lot of different things at once. And she's also very fast in the way that she walks and the way that she thinks. So again, you have some more of those characteristics of air and space element. But I also know that Margaret is very focused and very driven. And there you have some of the characteristics of fire element, or pitta. And so I would say that your diagnosis, constitution-wise, is a combination of vata and pitta.
Thank you so much. And so then if we turn from that and talk about the Ayurvedic side of this and the diet, I want to bring in Nalini now and ask her, and maybe, and from what you've said earlier too, this idea of being in balance and out of balance, my stress, we probably would have talked about that, but we don't have time tonight, about some of the stress that I'm feeling with the pressures of keeping up with email and all this electronic media. So I'm, you know, could be considered someone who's a little bit out of balance, and maybe I could use my diet to improve that and feel a little more centered and less pulled.
Interestingly, that's how Dr. Annan and I met. One of his patients came to me and said, so I have his diagnosis, and what should I do? Because I know I'm Vata Pitta, like in your case, but how do I translate it into what should I eat? How does it make me feel better? So now you've been diagnosed as a constitution for Vata Pitta. So if you look at this chart here and you see you have more of the air and space element, but you also have the fire element from the pitta. So what are the elements that you're missing? It's such pure, simple math here. If you have 3 of the 5 elements, the 2 elements that you seem to need is the earth and some water and some space. So the food that will really bring you to that ground, it's, as Doctor said earlier, it's about that balance. If you are feeling air, you want to feel grounded. So you balance yourself with the elements that you're missing. So in your case, I would recommend a diet that you eat foods that are grounding. So sweet potatoes, whole grains, not sugar, but the element, each taste, we haven't touched upon taste yet, but each taste also has these 5 elements. So if the taste of sweet, for example, if you think of this taste sweet, it has the element of earth and water. So something that brings that taste to you would be good. Not chocolate. Or sometimes it's okay to have chocolate. But just don't feel guilty about it. So the emotional aspect also is important. So you could be eating the most organic food, but if you're feeling guilty about eating something that's not good for you, or so eating with that state of mind as well, that makes you feel good. Diet-wise, I'd include a lot of greens for you as well, to cool the pitta. Pitta being fire needs to be calmed down, not with cold water, but foods that cool you, that calm you. Does that make sense?
Annan, can you maybe pick up on this concept of the tastes that Nalini just described? Because I see that those also fit into this, these 3 different doshas.
Right. So Ayurveda thinks about 6 tastes when you're looking at food. So in the West, we think about carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and that's kind of how we break down different types of food. In Ayurveda, we have the 6 tastes. You have sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, and astringent. And I know you're familiar with many of these, but when we mean sweet, exactly as Nalini is saying, it's not exactly chocolate, although chocolate is sweet, but it means things like whole fruits and whole grains are healthy examples of sweet taste. Sour would be things like citrus and vinegar. Salty, you're very familiar with. Pungent are things like ginger, garlic, black pepper, things that have a little bit of spice to them. Bitter would be things, exactly as Nalini is saying, things like leafy green vegetables, kale, radicchio. There's a vegetable called bitter melon that you can have that's very, very bitter. And then astringent, maybe the taste that you're least familiar with, would be something like beans, legumes, again, leafy green vegetables. Astringent is sort of the taste that has a drying effect. So if you're wanting to understand astringent, imagine putting a tea bag in a cup of hot water and forgetting about it for a little while, and then you sip it. It kind of dries your mouth out a little bit. That's an example, extreme example of astringent taste. And on this slide, you kind of see which tastes, how they balance these 3 principles of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So the tastes that balance Vata are exactly as Nalini is saying, sweet, sour, and salty. The tastes that balance Pitta are bitter, astringent, and sweet. And Kapha are the tastes that balance it are pungent, bitter, and astringent. And you've heard a little bit of an example of how you would actually put that into practice. Like Nalini said that for a Vata imbalance, you would want to incorporate more fruits, more vegetables, more whole grains, things like that to balance that Vata principle.
I find that just if you look at yourself as that element and then balance, like you said earlier, it's about the opposite. It's not like will aggravate like. So if you have a lot of fire and you eat food that are fiery, or pungent, or that's going to increase the fire in your belly, you will tend to get aggravated and cause ulcers and cause more discomfort. But if you balance it with the opposite, it's complementary.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great point too. So maybe it may be hard to understand why sweet taste is the opposite of Vata. So again, if we think about sweet foods, especially unhealthy sweet foods, they're very heavy, right? If you eat a piece of cake, and please don't eat piece of cake on my account, but if you did eat a piece of cake, it's very heavy, right? It's going to be that sort of heavy influence on the body. It's going to sit in your stomach a little bit. And so you can imagine how that heavy influence counterbalances the lightness that a person might have in their mind and body. So that's kind of how Ayurveda works, using the opposite principle to balance. Thank you, Nalini, for highlighting that.
Now, we're at this point where we're coming into spring and out of winter. And I know, in some cultures we think of, the warm, cozy foods of winter. In Ayurvedic cooking, are there seasons to that? And is that also important in thinking about Ayurveda, thinking about nature? Do we change our diet based on the time of year?
So, as we started this conversation, I think what we really want to keep in mind is how are we connecting with nature? So seasons, one season being warm, the other season being cold, the other season being fall, do you know how you react to those seasons? So for summer, for example, what is the feeling? Which element do you associate the season with? Fire, right? Whereas if you think of winter and you think of fall, leaves are falling, there's air and space. So each of these seasons are associated with elements. So for example, in summer or spring, you see more, look at nature. Basically, it's calling out at you and saying, well, we have a lot of freshness and newness, and now using that nature of earth and water, which is prevalent in the spring season, balance your body. So if you take what's in nature and eat not what's in the packet of chips that you take from a packet, but really connecting with what's available to you locally and seasonally.
We've talked on one thing we haven't really hit on. I'd just like to touch on these slides that we have about what's in nature, and then transition to your actually cooking with some of these spices. Are the spices that we have in Indian cuisine that really stand out to us and reflect what you're talking about in terms of the warmth and natural tastes. Anna, do you want to walk through those just very quickly, and then we can move to the cooking?
Sure.
So this is one of the more common spices you find in Ayurvedic cooking, and it's also used in Ayurvedic herbology. It's turmeric, and turmeric is a rhizome, which means it's a root, and it happens to balance the principles of Pitta and Kapha, and it's often used for digestive ailments and the common cold. So in my house, I often will use this when my family gets the cold, and we have a name for it. It's called the hideous brew, because we throw all of these spices into this pot and we boil it up, and one of the main ingredients in that hideous brew is turmeric, because it's really great for congestion and cold. Ginger is another one that we throw into that pot because it's also very good for congestion. It's also very good for digestion, and so it's a great herb for those seasons, especially the spring, because it's going to balance the principles of Kapha especially. And then lastly, fennel, which is something I know you're all familiar with, is a very cooling spice. So in ginger, you have a very heating spice. Fennel is the opposite. It's still a spice, but it has a very cooling effect on the body. And so it's great for people who have a pitta constitution, for example, because it'll improve their digestion, but it won't increase the heat in their body because they already have too much heat in their system. And there are many others, but we thought we'd just give you a flavor for a few of these. And again, you'll hear more from Nalini later on spices when she does her demonstration.
One quick question, and that is, for example, in thinking about me, I really love turmeric, I love curries, I do love ginger, so this is fitting with what you're saying. I've learned to kind of gravitate to those. Can we use those in other cooking, like making my tuna fish with curry spices or turmeric? Do I still get the benefit of the Ayurvedic?
Absolutely. So, you naturally know what's good for you. And so you gravitate to it. There's something called craving, but if you're in tune with yourself, then it's not craving, but it's your body telling you what you need. So why one of us likes sweet and another likes savory? There's a reason for it. We all don't like the same thing, so not one diet fits all. So not that if you have to eat Ayurvedically, that you all have to now eat Indian food only. That's not what it amounts to. But you could definitely add some great turmeric. I mean, it's the queen of spices. That's one spice. If you had to add one spice after today, it would be turmeric. Especially with the weather in California, it just benefits you in so many ways. It's an antioxidant, it's anti-inflammatory, it's an antiseptic, and I can go on. I mean, it's really, truly one spice that you can add to your marinara sauce, you can add it to a stir fry. It really doesn't need to be too much, but just a bit every day can really increase your immunity and sharpen your brain. So I can go on.
As a scientist, I have to just say that there's a lot of research on each of these. There's certainly some of these spices, especially turmeric, and there's really compelling research to underscore what Nalini is saying about the anti-inflammatory qualities of that, but I won't go into that. It's science, and this is the night for cooking. And I think this is a perfect segue for you to go across the way.
And so you will have coming across to you grapes that I would request you to take from the cup and place it in your palm, all right? And I'll go over that side. And just feel the grape between your palms. So I'm taking a cherry tomato, but just close your eyes and just feel the shape, the temperature, the texture. Just roll it as if it's the first time you've ever felt anything like this. Notice the size, the texture, the temperature, just feel it. Feel it between your palms. And now let's take a deep breath in. And as you breathe out, make this sound. If you can close your eyes and just focus on your breath. Let's take another deep breath in. Observe the sensations in your body. Every incoming breath energizes the body, and every outgoing breath relaxes the body. Let's take one more deep breath in. Relax more and more. And now place the grape on your tongue, but don't bite it yet. Keeping your eyes closed if you can. Just roll it in your mouth. Feel again the texture, temperature, the shape. Just like a child, observe it as if you've never tasted it before. Now bite into it ever so little. And as the juice oozes out, observe the taste. And bite into it a little bit more and more. And feel the taste, the pulp, the juice, the texture of the skin. Is it sweet or is it sour? Just observe everything as if it's the first time you've ever had a bite like this. Enjoy it 100%. As if it's the last bite you're going to eat today. Feeling completely satisfied with it. And then when you've chewed it well, you can swallow it, whatever remains, maybe very little, and observe it going down your food gullet and into your stomach, and being very grateful for this one bite. Let's take another deep breath in and let it go. And whenever you feel ready, you can open your eyes. How did that feel? Good? So feeling energized is the purpose what food should do in your life, right? Food should energize you, just as sleep should energize you, just as exercising should energize you. But a big piece of it is how is your mind? If you, as Dr. Anand earlier said, how do you, Ayurveda connects you with your mind, body, and soul. So bringing the three together is an integral part of cooking Ayurvedically. And what we're going to do now is cook. So if you're angry, don't cook. That's the day you want to eat out. Because anyway, you don't know the energy with which the chef cooked. But if you're able to bring this energy to when you're cooking, then cooking becomes a celebration. Eating becomes a celebration. That's why we just did this 2-minute meditation. So bringing this aspect of Ayurveda and yoga is really integral to what we're doing here today. But today we're also eating real food, so I've got for you here a very simple recipe of sprouted mung beans. And before we make the mung bean salad, we're going to make chaat masala. So what is masala? Have you heard the word masala? Yeah. Masala is a blend of spices. So we're taking spices that have been used for centuries. Again, this is a chaat masala. Once you get familiar with spices, you'll see you don't have to use them in this specific recipe. They're very versatile. They can take a side dish to the main course. So really using these spices to see which spice connects with you best. Does that make sense? We're going to take the spice called cumin seeds. Almost all Ayurvedic recipes suggest the use of cumin seeds because it's very, tell me if I'm using the word right, carbonative. Carbonative is when foods, like the fennel seeds that Dr. Annan showed you earlier, they take away any disorders of the stomach. So if you use this about a teaspoon on a daily basis, you will feel better in your digestion. So here we are using 4 tablespoons of cumin seeds. And this is carom seeds. Carom seeds are also similar in nature. I remember, I'll tell you a story. My mother used to, every time I'd overeat, which I used to love, I'm a foodie, born like that, and I'd come back after eating at 2 or 3 different parties, and my stomach would be paining. So she would take a mixture of carom seeds with something called hing. Have you, anybody heard of hing? It's asafoetida. Honestly, it smells like the ass of something. I'll put it out there so you can smell it later. But this is almost like the Beano of Indian cooking. It is amazing, really. So my mother would powder and make a paste of this and rub it on my stomach. It would smell so bad that I thought she's punishing me. But it is the smell aspect but also what it's doing internally for you. So it takes away flatulence, just heaviness, and makes your stomach digest food easily. So just adding a few spices can really make a difference. So here we're toasting the cumin seeds. I've added a little bit of hing or asafoetida, and this is coriander seeds. Coriander seeds is the same as what we know as the herb cilantro. The seeds of cilantro is this. And I'm just roughly, what am I doing here? I've not added any oil. Can you see this? Yeah. It's got no oil in the pan, just the essential oils of the spices. You're releasing the essential oil of the spices, and for that you're giving it heat. Where is this spice or essential oil? It's right under the skin of the seed. So by toasting it, you release the flavors, and it's almost like perfume. You'll soon be able to smell it. So it's aromatherapy, and you're releasing all the essential oils here. I'm also adding a little bit of black salt. Black salt is actually pink in color, if you notice. It's similar to what you use in Himalayan salt. It's the rock, which is rich in minerals, and it's lower in sodium. So using these different spices will actually improve. What's the question? Is there a question? Okay. So black salt is just good for you in terms of how it provides you with nutrients and minerals. And so so you don't want the spices to turn black. You just want them to turn a slight brownish color. And it's, as I'm feeling it with my fingers, another thing, engaging all your senses while you're cooking. So here I can feel that the spices are warming up, and they're releasing some of those wonderful flavors. Once that happens, I move it over to a spice grinder. Olden days, they used to do it in a mortar pestle. If you can, that'll be great. But can you get this aroma yet or not? Not yet. Okay, soon you'll get it. So we're just grinding them to a fine powder. Okay, this is going to be magical. Just look at this. Do you see that? Did you see a little bit of smoke come through when you make it at home and you want to show your friends that you made something very exotic? Do the spice blend. And I believe you have recipes that you'll be getting of just the spice blend. Now, once I've powdered this, I add mango powder. This is raw mango powder. That's really an antioxidant. So, and also it's very sour. So it literally, when you have it, it'll pucker your whole body. So you mix it with these spices, so it's tangy. Typically, this spice blend is used in India in recipes that are like on salads or what we call street food. It's very easy to incorporate in your food. So I'm actually using this recipe in what we are going to make, which is sprouted mung bean salad with avocados. So we have here sprouted mung beans. Now you can have this raw or you can steam them. Now when you have them raw, they will be crunchy. Now if you like it crunchy, that's the way you have it. But like Margaret said earlier, if I'm vata, what should I eat? I would actually steam this or cook it very lightly. That's what we're going to do. So here we have it raw for Margaret. And then instead of avocados, which is a great addition, which you'll be getting in your tasting bowls in a minute, I wanted to show you a skill of cutting cherry tomatoes. So cherry tomatoes are a great addition to this recipe. or anything that's seasonally available to you. So when I live in California, can you see this? Oh, we lost it. Okay. Let me bring it forward. Is this good? Right here. Okay. So I pack a takeout container lid, all right? And I cover it, and I take a sharp knife, and I take it through. Okay? So what you're doing here is just making it easier for you to chop. But there is one integral part to cooking well, is using good knife skills. So that's one additional class I recommend. Take that knife skill class. It will make life fun to cook. So we are taking cherry tomatoes. And I'm using some onions. Oh, my sari is blocking it. So we're just blending them all in. Just see how colorful it is, isn't it? And then here I have an interesting addition. This is a tamarind chutney. It's got tamarind and dates. And all it is just concentrated tamarind that has been reduced to blend with dates. So do you notice something about what we're doing here? It's bringing all the different tastes. The sweet, the sour, the astringent, the bitter. So how did I get the sweetness from the dates that are in this chutney? The sourness from the tomatoes. And then the pungentness from the spice blend that we just added, because it had the warming qualities from the cumin, the cooling from the coriander, and the sourness from the mango powder. So you add that on here. Just stir it in. And the pungency also from the onions, right? So different elements. What are the other tastes we talked about? We talked about bitter tastes. Now some of the spices can be bitter, right? But mostly all green vegetables make it bitter. So not too much of it here. I'm adding cilantro to it. I, this morning, had it with arugula. So just adding arugula. Now, I think we should get the tastings going in a bit, but you'll see yours has avocado in it as well. So just you're grounding it with the sweet taste of avocado and of the mung bean. How is the mung bean sweet? Because it's actually a legume. You see it, the legumes in here. And how do you sprout these mung beans? Yoga is very similar in that, has anybody done hot yoga here? How many of you have done hot yoga? Can I tell you, people in India don't do hot yoga. Why? How's the weather in India? It's hot. You don't need to go to a hot room to do yoga. Similarly, sprouts in India, if they just are soaked overnight and then you let them drain and sit in clean space, they will sprout. But here I put them in almost like a yogurt maker or inside the oven in a warm space, just somewhere where there is about 100 degrees of 100 degrees weather. It will sprout. You just need to keep it covered, moist but not wet, and then it'll start to sprout. Now the beauty of sprouts is that it is actually higher in nutrients and easier to digest than the legume itself. So it's like a small sapling of the plant, and therefore it releases all its flavors, but also it becomes lower in calorie and carb content than the legume itself. Isn't that interesting? So you get twice as much of nutrients, so high on vitamin C, high on vitamin K, also high on potassium and iron. So the same legume that is dried when wet and soaked and then made into sprouts will be so much higher in nutrient value. So that, along with avocado, which is, did you all taste it? Did you all get a tasting? Yeah, you like it? Yeah. So the avocado is great for vitamin E, you know, and it's also sweet. The taste's sweet. So balancing your meal will make sure that you are satisfied at all levels, mind, body, and soul. That's what, otherwise you keep craving for something else. You know, why is America just now looking to bring, we all crave for ice cream or we crave for some dessert. Why? What is it that the taste of sweetness, what does it do for you? It helps reduce anxiety in the mind. So it has a purpose, but we have to make sure that we bring to our consciousness that if you bring the 6 tastes mindfully, you will be satisfied. Just in a bite or two, you will feel much more satisfied than a big bowl which fills your stomach but does not satisfy your mind or body. Does that make sense? All right, we're about to take questions in a bit. Allison will give me the clue. Tell me when we're ready to take questions. But see how beautiful this is. So your sense of smell, when you use this, the sense of taste, the sense of texture, of touch or texture, and overall a sense of well-being is achieved when we all eat well, we feel that, right? We're all foodies. Inherently, we are foodies because food is nature's way of calling us and connecting with us. I think we're ready to take some questions. And if you have specific questions, we'll take them in a bit. But I really encourage you to eat, not necessarily, this is, as you can tell, there's some spices that were Indian, but most of it is local and seasonal. That is the key quality. However, if you'd like to get the whole experience of the spices, come on culinary trips with us to India. Yeah. We're taking a trip this October and there are flyers at the back. So I encourage you to really soak in that experience of Ayurveda to come to India with us. What's the question? Oh. Like somebody said earlier, the south of India is the origin of most of the spices. So we go to the south of India, but I'm from the north of India, so we do 10 days in the north of India in Rajasthan and 10 days in the south of India in Kerala.
Okay. Nalini, we do have some questions. One question that is a really good one is that many of us buy ground spices, and how do we pick good quality ground spices, and your thoughts also about these pre-mixed blends like Madras curry, things like that.
Sure,
So
yes.
if you could talk a little bit, because we see that you're using the seeds themselves. So
Exactly.
maybe educate us around that whole issue.
Absolutely. So we talked about the essential oil within every spice. So in the seed, the spice essential oil is right in its full form. When you crush it, you're breaking the essential oil, and just like perfume, it is going to whiff away. So if you buy powdered spice, it tends not to be so potent with its aroma, its flavor. It loses some of that. So keeping it good in an airtight container for about a couple of months is good. And I believe in the Asian Art Museum, in the shop, you have the spice box that you could buy, which keeps it airtight and makes it easily available. I have a spice box that I use all the time. This is one of my spice boxes, which you can see here.
Okay.
Yeah? So something that really keeps it tight and keeps the aromas in is a good idea. But also if you're able to take your own whole seeds, like we use, this is coriander and cumin. It takes a few seconds, right? That's what we did, just toasted them and then ground them. It just makes it much more potent.
Nalini, if I can just add to that a bit. So one good way to use these is to customize the spices to the individual. And so if you see an Ayurvedic practitioner, they can help to customize a set of spices that you can use in your cooking on a day-to-day basis. That's something that I do in my practice for my patients. And in terms of some places to get good spices, so Rainbow Grocery here in San Francisco is an excellent place to get very fresh spices. Yeah, do we have some rainbow people here? Yeah. So, and then you can order online as well. There's a great company called Mountain Rose Herb Company that also sells really wonderful, very fresh spices. And so you can, as Nalini suggested, buy the seeds and then grind them.
Or come with us to India, buy them from the source.
Yeah.
Here's another question. It's, can fresh mint or rock salt be used for the masala instead of dry mint and black salt?
Good question. See, the whole idea of the masala is that it is a dry blend, right? But masala can be a wet blend as well. How many of you have had masala dosa? Anybody here? Yeah, dosa. Masala is any blend of some spices. So you could take mint and put, just like we added cilantro, you could add mint at that point for sure. But in the dry blend, if you put wet ingredients, it'll moisten the dry blend and make it more granular and not so fine. Yeah?
Another question, this is a different one, is about ghee. Can you talk about ghee and how does it affect cholesterol levels in the body? And maybe this is one that both of you could talk about.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yes, of course. So in the past, when people first heard about ghee, the immediate reaction was never have ghee because it's going to raise your cholesterol levels. And in fact, I remember being in medical school in the 1990s, and that's what was told to us. But subsequently, I've seen a number of studies that have been done on ghee. And, oh, yes, of course, sorry. Ghee is clarified butter. So it's where you take, to prepare ghee, you take butter, unsalted butter, and you cook it on a very low heat until the milk solids separate from the fat. And then you remove the milk solids, which become sort of these fine crystals on the bottom, and you're essentially just left with the fat part of the butter. And so what I was saying is that they've done studies on this, research studies, and they found that, at least in these studies, that it didn't negatively impact on people's cholesterol levels. So again, with that, I think moderation is always needed. I think if we eat lots of ghee, yes, probably we will have problems with our cholesterol. But the message to me there is that in moderation, that it can be a safe thing to have and won't affect your cholesterol.
Very much like, avocado. Avocado oil, ghee, they're all oils that actually go on high smoking points. So those are the oils sometimes better to cook with than olive oil, for example, that has a low smoking point. So just to add to that, but I love ghee. I've always loved ghee. I could have it raw. I could have it just in spoonfuls, but in moderation. But I also feel as I'm growing older, I find it just half a teaspoon, like when I have my vitamin D, which doesn't get dissolved in my system easily. But if I have it with ghee, it's easier to be soluble, I believe. It's just easier to digest.
And yeah, related to that, actually, most oils are heavy on the digestion, and they are difficult to digest. But the traditional belief on ghee is that it's one of the few oils that's actually easy to digest. And so that's why it's often used actually in Ayurvedic herbology as well. Many times we mix herbs with ghee to try to deliver them to a particular part of the body or mind. So.
We have a question, or just some words. I think I understand what they meant. And we're thinking about Ayurvedic cooking. Is this primarily vegan? What about cheese? And can fish be Ayurvedic cooking?
So well, I'll let you address the medicinal piece because I know some of this is medicinally okay. I do believe that if you eat Ayurvedically and eat vegetarian and vegan, it does benefit you in that it's easier to digest. So one of the factors that we haven't spoken about so far is how does your fire in your belly, or the Agni as we call it, it's all about digestion. If your digestion is good, Ayurveda says you can eat a stone. There's a proverb in India called Lakkar Hazam, Patthar Hazam. That which has a strong digestion can have anything. So yes, if you have that kind of a digestion, you should. And unfortunately, folks living in the city rarely ever have that because of our sedentary lifestyle. But if you can, work it and have a strong digestion, I guess you can have anything, but I recommend a vegetarian diet.
The other thing that impacts on digestion is stress, and so many of us are suffering from a lot of stress, and that weakens digestion as well. In terms of cheese, this may be unpopular, but I actually advocate for people not to eat cheese for a number of reasons. Ayurvedically, one thing we didn't get a chance to talk about today is food combinations. And there are certain combinations of foods that become very difficult to digest, and one of them is salt and milk. And if you just even think about that for a moment and imagine drinking a glass of milk with salt in it, it sort of turns your stomach. And many cheeses are made with that combination of salt and milk. So already that food is a little bit difficult to digest. So in fact, if a person is going more in the direction of vegetarian or vegan, I actually think it's better to either have less cheese or favor fresh cheeses as opposed to the aged ones.
And tell us what would be examples of fresh cheeses.
So things like fresh mozzarella would be an example, would be better than sort of like an aged, I don't know, blue cheese or something like that.
I guess it's also the over-fermentation that's the problem. If it's over-fermented, it's over-sour, and it's difficult for the body to digest it.
We have a question. We've talked then, say we have to cut back on cheese perhaps here, and then we've heard about all these wonders of turmeric, and there's a question, should turmeric, should it be bought powdered or whole? And can you use whole turmeric or turmeric in cooking?
If you can, and in California we are so blessed because we get every vegetable that you can conceive of, so you get fresh turmeric. Yes, you can use that whole, you can chop it finely, and just saute it. Of course, your hands will be a different color for the next week, but that's okay. But do not try and blend. I have some of the roots that Dr. Annan was showing earlier of the turmeric rhizome at the back. If you put that in the blender, in a spice blender, your blades will just go. It's a very strong spice. It's a very strong root. So do not try and blend it at home. You can mortar pestle it and see the beauty of the color in there, but don't try and powder it at home. So we do buy the powder.
I think the same is true for ginger. You can buy powdered ginger, but in most supermarkets you can get fresh ginger. And it's so much better to cook that, but again, doesn't do so well in the little blenders always.
Well, great fresh ginger, great turmeric if it's fresh. Yeah, absolutely. And just that what pot did you call it? The hideous pot.
Hideous brew.
Hideous brew. It's having ginger in your refrigerator is I make my chai with it. I use it in my stir fry. Putting ginger and turmeric on a daily basis in everything.
Nalini just mentioned chai or tea, and I think there's one just sort of a very interesting fact in working with the two of these experts that I've learned. Maybe mention a little bit about tea in China, tea in India, and what you mean by tea, because you both have talked about this in your cooking and also as something to drink.
Right, so tea is actually not native to India. It's actually native to China and was originally brought to India by the British in colonial times. And now, of course, it grows there and it's a very popular drink in India, but it's not a native plant. And so it's not really a part of Ayurveda as such. And so when I think of chai, I'm thinking again of the spices, and some common ones would be things like ginger, cardamom, cinnamon are kind of the common chai spices.
We have some cardamom also at the back if you'd like to smell it. Cardamom is one of those spices that's also good for the nervous disorders, as is ghee. And when you have cardamom and ginger, just grate the ginger and just have just the water, it's just delicious. It just, in the morning, I think when I have it, I just feel, and with turmeric, you just feel more awake and alive.
So do you ever put the ginger, just when you say you have it, do you?
I grate the ginger.
And then? And
then I add it to the tea, and I let the water boil to a half. And that's with turmeric and with some cardamom powder. The cardamom you need to powder. And that's okay in this, but I do like mortar pestle because I think this makes the friction of a spice blender is so sharp that it takes away some of the sweetness of cardamom.
And just to sort of add to this point about chai, so ginger, cinnamon, cardamom are used in chai, and most chais that you'll have will have milk in them. And so the milk, again, is a heavier item, and so the reason the ginger and the cinnamon and cardamom are there is to help you to digest the heavier milk that's in that chai. Because again, remembering back to what we talked about earlier, the ginger increases your digestion, so does the cinnamon, so does the cardamom. So the combination of those things, again, make it more balanced and digestible.
The question was, what about yogurt? Again, having food that's fermented. So yogurt, the process of making yogurt is fermentation. So when you're fermenting, and it's got really good bacteria, so which is really good for your stomach. However, if it's over-fermented, if the yogurt's been sitting like it sits on the shelves in the grocery store, it's not so easy to digest. Then it's that same quality of cheese. So making yogurt and having it fresh is the key.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that because, as you say, the yogurt that's in the market is oftentimes weeks or maybe even months old, and as it sits, it ferments and it decays, and it becomes very hard to digest. And according to Ayurveda, yogurt has the property of called kleda. Kleda means that it's going to create stagnation in the body, particularly when it's old. And so, again, I very much agree with Nalini that if you're going to have yogurt, to have it freshly made if possible.
It's an everyday ritual in India. Everyday yogurt is set, and everyday milk comes from the cow fresh. So it's literally.
And it's not very difficult to make yogurt at home, actually. It's quite simple. So
for some of us.
Okay, we're going to do a really quick blitz because actually, just as Allison is telling me only 2 questions, a whole bunch of good ones came. So this is going to be stump the experts, answer quickly. Can you spell the name of the spice? I'm showing the Vata part of me. Sorry. Okay. Can you spell the name of the spice that smells so badly? Can you spell that quickly?
I can't. Can you?
Asafoetida. Asafetidoa.
I think there's an O in there, actually.
Okay. Yeah. Asafoetida. Just do. There's nothing. No other word. Your Google will fix it. Just do asafoetida.
Okay. Does dried ginger have the same nutrient value as ginger root? Quickly.
So dried ginger and fresh ginger, Ayurvedic, they have different properties. So dried ginger is more heating, and it's better for someone with a kapha constitution, again, the one with more earth and water element. Whereas fresh ginger, because it has more water content, is a little bit better for a vata constitution, and it's a little bit less heating. And so they're used a little bit differently.
Can you please repeat slowly the name of the website where you buy the spices? Something about the mountain?
Mountain Rose Herbs, I think. Yeah, mountain as in the mountain, and rose as in the flower.
Here's an important question for Nalini. You're having a dinner party, and what do you do if you have it's a sort of an interdosha group?
Very good question.
And you've got all mixed doshas. Which dosha sits next to which one? But I think it's about cooking.
Within a family, you have one personality and just 2 siblings. They're 2 different personalities, right? So you can't cook differently for each individual or every member of the family. But if you include the 6 tastes, just make sure that you have the 6 tastes. Then there will be satisfaction. Now, somebody who is pitta can have more of the greens, whereas somebody who's more vata will have more of the lentil soups or the bread or some of the grounding foods.
In fact, just to echo that point, which we didn't get to talk about, is that you should have all the 6 tastes in every meal. That's the other important principle, is you should see on your plate all the 6 tastes, no matter what your constitution is.
And it could be just one dish, but should have all the 6 tastes.
As I'm trying to get on to go back to the slide that has the tastes. There they are. Okay. This is the last question for Annan. Can you talk about how you came to study Ayurvedic and Western medicine? And is there any tension between the 2?
That's a good question. Ayurveda is in my family. My grandmother used to keep her house and take care of her family using Ayurveda. And so I always had that influence growing up of Ayurveda in the family. But then I became interested in science and went to medical school and did medicine. And I never thought that I would be able to do anything with Ayurveda in my career. But then early in my career in medicine, integrative medicine happened. And all of a sudden you have this expansive new movement where we're thinking about how we can improve our health system using other non-traditional systems of medicine. And so then I thought, well, if I can do integrative medicine, why not also do Ayurveda? And I found it to be very useful because it really expands how you can think about health. So if a patient comes to me with complaints, like let's say complaints like fibromyalgia, which some of you may be familiar with, which is muscle and joint aches that are sort of undefinable by Western medicine. And Western medicine doesn't really know what to do with that condition. Because I also have Ayurveda to use, and all of a sudden I have a new perspective on that. And that same condition which Western medicine has difficulty with is a specific disease in Ayurveda that's actually written about in the ancient texts. And so now all of a sudden I have a diagnosis and I have a treatment plan that I can use for that patient. And it also validates that person's complaints because now no longer are they just making it up. It's actually a real disease and we have a real treatment for it. So yes, there is some tension between these two systems, but more often than that, I find that they complement each other and they help me to do my work.
Thank you, and I want to say that the two of you complement each other very well. Notice he was talking about his grandmother, and you were talking about your mother when you came home and how she cared for you.
She was diagnosed with cancer, and had she not shown me through her living example of how Ayurveda can be practiced, I would be a food junkie, meaning that I love bad food. But just she inspired me to see how your quality of life is more important than the quantity of your life, and how you can live every moment with fullness, with celebration.
So I want to thank all of you for participating in this and hearing about how you can live your life more fully in every moment. And I hope that some of you have experienced some moments in this evening, either in eating the grape, the meditation, or being inspired by hearing about really healthy cooking and how we can care for ourselves and that our bodies can actually be, in many ways, self-healing. So thank you so very much. For those of you, the museum is still open. The exhibition is downstairs waiting for you. There's also a cafe that has very, very healthy food. So please visit the cafe. Please enjoy the exhibition. And can we please give a big hand to our two experts?